Today on the Idiot's Guide, we're talking about why do other drivers drive us so mad? We'll look at the numbers and see what they have to say for themselves. And it's been 30 years since QWERTY got a makeover. So we'll talk about really what Microsoft has planned in how it's going to incorporate a new permanent edition. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, aka the Profit Hacker, and I'm joined by the man in charge, Mr. Joe Haslam. Welcome to the Idiot's Guide. So I think one of the things that I want to kind of start this episode out on is the fact that, I mean, what better day to do this than if you look outside of our office and studio windows, we are dealing with probably one of the biggest snows of the season to start off the season.
Yeah.
We haven't really had anything, and that's typical. Usually about this time is when we really start getting snow, and then it doesn't stop until July. So, I mean, last year that's how it was, but this year hopefully it stops sooner than that. But I mean, what I always notice is it doesn't. I mean, it takes like a breeze, and then everyone sucks at driving. Usually, honestly, at this point in time, like depending on the hour is literally what it is. It makes no difference whether it's, right now or if it's, or if it's a snowstorm or if it's a sunny day. Everybody just sucks at driving, and it's so infuriating that it's one of those things that, like, I'm not an aggressive driver. Well, okay, let me say that I'm a confident driver.
Clever word choice.
But I don't have like I'll do a honk, like a beep beep kind of a thing. I don't lay on my horn and be like, ah, unless someone's about to die because I'm going to hit them because they did something stupid, Like, that's about the only time that I'm like letting them know, move, this is not acceptable kind of a thing. But usually it's their fault. I mean, I say all that like I'm like this. I'm not an angel when it comes to driving, okay? But, minus this halo that's above my head in the pre-recording setup.
Yeah.
But I think that's, like, I'm going over these statistics. I'm checking them out, seeing what's going on. And honestly, like, it's everywhere. Like, everywhere sucks. And it's everywhere is bad. Everywhere is infuriating, and you're going to run into it. And you're like, why? Like, we can't go backwards when it comes to cars. We're only making more progress into things that, like, I'm afraid of when they start introducing not only electric vehicles, but like autonomous vehicles, because I mean, I heard an article the other day, and they were talking about adding a new light to the traffic lights that is a digital like relay signal that communicates with all of the autonomous vehicles simultaneously so that it knows traffic flow patterns, and all the vehicles are communicating with each other. That's scary stuff, okay? Like, it scares the crap out of you when you're like, when you're sitting in a coffee shop and you're on an unsecured browser, everybody can see your stuff. And I'm like, I don't want anybody looking at my stuff. No, like, it's that kind of concept. My brain goes there, and I'm like, what are they doing? Are they taking pictures of me while I'm driving? Like, anyway, it's all a device to control the world, people. Don't worry.
Our AI overlords.
And honestly, like, it's headed in that direction. But at the end of the day, we're still left to ourselves operating vehicles. And, Yep. When you talk about somebody who's like, you ask them, and he's like, do you know how to drive manual? And most people don't at this point.
Yeah.
You really have to search and know vehicles. I mean, now there's push buttons. Like,
oh yeah,
not just like I have a push button start. So that's fancy. I thought I was like, woohoo. Yeah, that's real fancy. No, my wife works with some doctors, and they literally, when they're driving their cars, it is gear shift. It's like a manual, but it shifts gears with buttons, like a keyboard.
Yep. So they used to be the flappy pedal gearboxes. So you have them behind the steering wheel.
Yeah.
I've got that in my car.
Okay.
Mine's an automatic, but it does have the option to go into manual drive if I want to. And so I've got the flappy paddles.
Flappy paddles.
Flappy paddles.
I like that term. That's actually like when it's in manufacturing, they're like, don't forget the flappy paddles. You know?
So I can't take credit for that term. That comes from Top Gear and the Grand Tour. That's a Jeremy Clarkson one right
okay,
there.
so
But no, the flappy paddles. But now they've got the you're pushing the buttons. You don't do anything. You just hit them. So you don't. And even now, so when they started with those flappy paddle gearboxes, it essentially starts the transition for you, and then you finish the gear shift.
okay.
And so that's how it works. And so it's a complicated gearbox, but essentially it's doing half the work for you. So you don't have to be as coordinated. So hitting the clutch, moving it, hitting the right slot on the gearbox as you're doing it, keeping the gas right in the perfect spot. It takes a lot. So,
Sir, because you were so aggressive with your flappy paddles, we have to replace your transmission. And because it has flappy paddles and it's intuitive in its design, we're talking about $85,000 for you to replace that flappy paddle transmission.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's crazy. I learned how to drive a manual. I had been driving for maybe a year, and we had to. I can't remember all the details, but we were driving through Vegas, and it was me and my mom and I think some of my siblings, and we were getting a rental car and leaving her truck with some relatives in Vegas. And so because it was a rental, I couldn't drive it because I was only 17 at the time. And so I'd been, like I said, been driving maybe a year. And I had to drive my mom's manual truck. This is the first time I'd ever driven manual. And this was in the streets of Vegas.
Oh, wow. That's
So
terrible.
learning how to drive a manual on the streets of Vegas for the first time ever in a truck, no less.
Oh,
Trucks notoriously bad for getting that ratio right on the gas clutch and making sure it slots into the right spot. But yeah, that was my experience. And honestly, if I can learn how to do that on the streets of Vegas, anyone can learn how to drive a manual. It should be a required part of the driving test. I know automatics are easier. I have an automatic. It's easier. It is. But understanding the mechanics and the dynamic of how to shift and being able to, while you're driving, pay attention to the road in front of you, being able to pay attention to the road around you, really, and being able to shift gears at high speed in all this going around, that kind of multitasking is really important for drivers and should be a required part of it because right now it's just too easy to get behind a wheel and off you go.
yeah.
And you learn not to pay attention.
Well, with self-driving cars, why would you?
Yeah, it's getting even worse. Self-driving cars. I mean, I don't think we'll ever get to the point where self-driving cars are actually going to be self-driving. And it's not the technology. It's the idea of being able to monitor everything that's going on around you.
Right.
And be able to adapt to that.
My car has sensor tech in it so that if I'm going down the highway, let's say, for example, I can set the cruise control. And when the cruise control goes, it won't let me set it above a certain speed limit. So I can't, I think it's like 90. So that's still sufficient. That's pretty good. But once it's at night, I can't go above 90 and I want to go above 90, dang it.
Why would you ever want to go above 90?
I don't know. I have the stat for speeding.
The speed limit in most places, I know what it is for our state.
Our state is insane.
Highest speed anywhere, but the highest speed I've ever seen is 85. And that's on California roadways.
We were visiting Denver over the holiday. and right through the main city on I-25, Interstate 25 is 55 miles an hour. And we're like, what in the world is wrong with these people? Like, there's just a bunch of grandmas driving around. Nobody drove 55. Like,
No.
if you did, people are flipping you off and like, just, ugh.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing. Because I am an adherent to the rules. I follow the rules of the road.
So our posted speed limit on our inner city is 70.
Yep.
Do you go 70?
I go 70 miles an hour. My speed limit, my speedometer,
You're going to get a badge for that. Like, that's it. Like a winner.
my speedometer, and I've tested this. I drive by there a lot of the speed radars that tell you what your speed is. So I regularly check my speed because it can depend on the inflation of your tires. There can be a lot of things. So I actually check the speed of my vehicle against the radar machines to make sure that the speed I am going based on my digital speedometer is the speed that I am going on the freeway. So I'm off anywhere. It depends on the speed I'm going from 1 to 3 miles an hour. And so my speedometer will read, 71 or 73, but I do know that I am going 70 miles an hour.
Well, on the complete opposite side of that, I pushed the limit a little bit, and I saw a news broadcast one time a while back, and they were interviewing a trooper, and one of the troopers, like, they were asking them, like, is there like a zone that you're watching for? And most of them, if you're at 10 over, they're good with 10 over. They're like, yeah, that's fine. If you're at 11 over, now you're questionable. If you're at 13, you're going to get stopped.
Yeah.
So 12 over the speed limit means it's safe.
No, it doesn't mean it's safe. It means that's when you will not get pulled over. It's
Right.
still breaking the law. You just will not be pulled over for it.
Oh, okay.
So
I was confused.
Now, the reason they say that is because, like I said, I check my speedometer. And I make sure that my speedometer is exactly right. It's a digital speedometer, and I've got it's the laser radars, and so I know what my speed is. I'm neurotic. No one's going to do that.
No, and you're probably like one of those like left lane loafers that just hangs out in the left lane. You're like,
No.
everyone needs to be law abiding.
No,
like,
no. I do not go into the left lane because the left lane is for people that are going over the speed limit.
82
Exactly.
miles an hour in a 70.
So I do not, unless I'm passing someone, unless I have no other option, I do not get into that far left lane.
Okay,
Because I understand the rules of the road.
that's
And
good.
everyone's speedometer is just a little bit different. So they can't, they work really hard, the manufacturers, to make sure that it is specific. But everything can change a speedometer and what the actual speed is. And so that's why generally they're not going to pull you over if it's, less than 10 miles an hour. It's not permission to speed. It's just that there's so many variations with everything. There could be any number of reasons why you're passing. Say you're passing a truck and you're trying to get past the truck before you get to a one-lane road. So they're going to give you a pass to go 10 miles an hour over because you're trying to be safer. And this is something that I teach my kids. If the rules of the road say you have to go faster, you go faster. If it is for the safety of the other vehicles around you, such as passing a truck, there are a lot of reasons why you may need to go a little bit faster, then you go faster. At the same time, you also need to go slower if the road says so.
You're right, and I have some numbers that really actually kind of talk about that.
Yeah. And so when I go to California or if I'm in Denver, then I go over the speed limit. I try to avoid it.
Because 55 is dumb. Like,
Well,
just dumb.
if I get up to a pack of people, because I'm not the only one that's like this. Fortunately, there are other people like me. And occasionally I'll find pockets of them on the road. And that makes me happy because I'll get next to them or behind them And now it's not me breaking the rules of the road. I'm going the speed limit, but I'm behind them, so they're the ones that are causing the problem. So in my mind, I'm saying, "Oh, don't yell at me. It's this car that's causing me to go slow."
There's power in numbers.
So I'll try to find those pockets of people and I'll go the speed limit. But if there are no pockets of those people, then yeah, I'll go the prevailing road conditions. And because if everyone's going, say, 70 on a 55, and I try to go 55, I'm actually the dangerous one.
Right.
I'm causing the danger by trying to follow the speed limit.
Yeah.
And so in that condition, it's okay, I have to speed because otherwise I'm going to be a danger to other people on the road. And so it's all about making sure that you are not a danger.
Okay, so how many other people? Let's say this. So in 2019, and this is the most recent stats basically as far as licensed drivers, there were 228,679,719 licensed drivers and 299,267,114 registered vehicles in the United States. Now, of these drivers, they drove a total of 3,261,772,000,000 miles collectively over that year.
Wow.
Now, that's just kind of drivers on the road. So when we talk about drivers, that's the number we're talking about. Is
Lots of
228 million of them. So men are slightly more likely to drive than women, and that's not a sexist thing. That's a stat.
Yeah.
From 2019 to 2020, 94% of males, U.S. residents aged 16 and older drove at least occasionally, whereas 93% of female residents did. So it's not like a chasm. You're like, wow, geez Louise, 1%. We're talking about 228 million. That's a big number. Okay. The highest rated cause of accidents, speed.
Yep.
Speed-related crashes cost Americans $40.4 billion each year.
Oh yeah, it's an expensive thing. Now, speeding isn't necessarily, and I don't know the stats. You've got all the stats, but I'm going to assume that speeding is probably not the biggest cause of death in accidents and car accidents. That there's probably another one that's higher.
Speeding continues to be the number one cited driver-related factor in fatal highway crashes.
Oh, okay. So I was wrong there.
Now the third, I didn't spot the second one. I was kind of skimming through this stuff, but the third one is for pedestrian fatalities. Basically, is distracted.
Yeah.
So I would assume the second is within line with both of those, speeding and under the influence.
Yeah.
So those are probably the two leading causes of fatalities. And then distraction, obviously, they've done the statistics that show like distracted driving is an equivalent to, having a case of beer kind of a thing. So, and it's really terrible when you see like you're watching a driver going down the street. I mean, today I saw this and I'm like, what are you doing? Like guys, with their phone, like they're almost recording while they're driving down the road. Like either they're recording the road or they're recording themselves. It doesn't matter. At that point, like, don't be recording while you're operating a vehicle in a snowstorm.
I was driving down the highway. This was maybe a year or two ago. I was driving down the highway. So we're talking about 80 miles an hour speed. And I passed a vehicle. So I guess maybe he was going less than 80. He had what looked like an iPad. So it wasn't a phone. This was an actual iPad. Or, like a Kindle or something like that. It was big. And he had it, and he was looking down, reading what looked like a book. Because I could see enough from where I was of what he was doing. I think it was like twilight time. So not necessarily nighttime, but it was dark enough that the illuminated screen showed me what he was looking at. And it was below the steering wheel, or kind of like 3/4 of the way down the steering wheel, leaning up against it. And both of his hands were on the iPad as he's looking down, and reading at twilight, going probably 75 miles an hour.
There's this, I remember like, the Pokemon Go stuff. Like, that was a big issue for when it first came out. They're like, you got to make this so that it like has an intuitive part of the app. It realizes this person is driving a vehicle, because when they're like, I had to stop on the freeway to catch that one, got to catch them all, and just I mean, like I remember that. And, like, for me, one of the things that was kind of not related to Pokemon Go, thank God.
Yeah.
But I would take my phone, and like if I was on road trips, I would take my phone and put it up on my dash in front, like a heads up display, so I could watch TV shows while I was driving down the highway. However, I have my eyes directly forward. I have a lot more visibility. I'm not reading something small.
Now, that is something that I actually do, and it is something that, for certain people actually helps. And here's the reason why. This is why it helps me. I suspect it's probably the same reason why it helps for you.
Okay.
And I don't see this as distracted driving. Okay, because you're not fiddling with it, you're not doing anything to it. You're more listening to it than you are watching. And for me, when I'm driving down a stretch of road that has nothing around, my mind wanders.
Yeah.
And I am easily distracted to either think about something, to, what should I be doing at work? The work project, I'm working out some Excel spreadsheet in my head. The total number of things that I could be focused on.
Especially if I don't have something I'm listening to.
Exactly. In my brain. And that makes me more distracted from focusing on the road than having this little video up there that actually keeps my attention on the road.
Yeah.
And so that actually is a big help for me to have something like that.
So, listener, if you need a car radio, I can't help you, but I suggest you to get some headphones and like listen through your phone. I don't care, whatever you do, have something going. It's gonna help. I promise. Yeah. I listen to podcasts. So I listen to podcasts, and recently I noticed this with my service is Spotify, and they allow you to do audiobooks. So now I have like an entire library waiting for me to listen to my audiobooks. It's so funny because I go over and I have an Audible account where I have some books that are there that I've purchased.
Not a sponsor.
No, none of these. Sorry. If you want, though, of course.
Nice.
We so I have both of those services, but Audible, obviously they're always like, hey, subscribe and you can get all these books. Well, now I just go and I see like a recommendation from Audible, and I go over to Spotify to see if it's there, and I'm like, oh, cool, it's within my plan. Yes, I'll add it to my library. So now I have like somewhere in the ballpark like 200 hours of books to listen to, and they're really good books. So it's like it's everything. Like and honestly, the library is massive. If you want to go on an adventure or something like that, like some sort of fantasy book, it'll be there.
Yeah,
it's all there. It's cool.
What I would recommend is try not to listen to something that you've never listened to before, never watched before. So because that can actually be more distracting. So if it's something that you've already seen before, so like 2 years ago, we did a big road trip down to South Carolina. We drove there and back. And I watched the Harry Potter movies.
Okay.
And so that was enough content for the 30-hour drive there and the 30-hour drive back. But they were something I had seen before, so I could see it in my head. I didn't have to watch the screen to see what was going on. I knew what was going on because I'd seen them all before. And so that makes it a lot easier to prevent you from being distracted, but still not allowing your brain to be distracted by, a 30-hour drive. That's a massive drive. But that helps prevent your brain from wandering and getting distracted, not paying attention to the road.
So one of the things is like when you're like, whether this is on the highway or even in inner city, this stat was kind of surprising to me, but it was over 50% of the 5 million yearly car crashes in the United States, they're caused by aggressive drivers. So that means, speeding being the most prevalent contributor to this statistic. But, the aggressive driver part of it's just kind of saying like, hey, I'm mad. And there was another one that said, I think I actually put it down here. Yeah, half of the drivers who are on the receiving end of aggressive behavior. So let's say somebody's riding your bumper, or they're hand gesturing, or yelling, honking their horn. Side note. There was a traffic jam at the intersection down the street from us right here. And there was like lights, and it was because the school bus had stopped or something like that down the street. And all the lights were like, it gets really busy by about 2:30 at this light. And so like you're talking lots of cars every single stop, every single red light. And the cars were backing up into the intersection. None of the lights have changed. It's still a green light for them. So they're not technically they're not even a yield yet. So they're still fine. And this car 2 lanes over in the middle of the center lane of everything is laying on their horn at all the cars in front of them. Like the only reason why I noticed this is my wife and I were like at the same intersection, and she was further up and she could see what was going on. She's like, yeah, the idiot in the center lane is the one who's honking their horn, because I could hear it and she could hear it. And so it was just kind of one of those like, really?
Because the cars weren't going into the intersection?
No, they were. So there was a backup on the crossing, so going across from in front of this car, and this car was at the stoplight, the red light, center lane, waiting to have their turn.
Yeah.
Red light, like honking at the cars that were backed up in the intersection. Not clearing the intersection yet. It was still a green light for them. And this car was just going to town on their horn. I was like, what are you guys doing?
Wow.
So anyway, that's just because I saw stupid happen. So 66% of traffic fatalities are caused by aggressive drivers. 37% of aggressive driving incidents involve a firearm. That's crazy.
That's scary.
Just to think that like it escalates to that level. But in this, half of the drivers who are on the receiving end of aggressive behavior, such as horn honking, rude gesture, tailgating, admit to responding with aggressive behavior themselves.
Yep.
And honestly, like that's what sucks is it's like you have these situations where somebody is just being a jerk on the road, and yeah, rightfully so. Like you feel justified, and you're like, look, fire with fire, bud. And then all of a sudden you're like, except that I had to run that red light to catch up to you because you made me so angry, and I took out a minivan full of kids. And you're like, dang,
Yeah.
So,
and now there's a neurological reason why that happens. One, a little bit why there's aggressive driving, but also why in so many cases do the recipients of that aggressive driving reciprocate. And part of that is it's just the protection mechanism. It's you have a perceived threat, and so you have a fight, flight, or freeze response. And for a lot of people, it's a fight response when you're in that situation. And so when you are perceived as being threatened, rather than running, rather than freezing, you respond with that response.
or you have a giant rolling pile of metal that you're behind, so you have some extra confidence in you.
Yeah, it's the same in any situation. That's what you're going to respond with. And it's perfectly normal. Not great, not ideal, obviously, but that is normal. And the ideal is to not respond that way. And so you have to learn coping mechanisms, other things like that to help you not respond that way. And so it's not necessarily your fault. I mean, if you're on the receiving end of a horrible driver, that's going to be your first response is you are going to want to protect yourself, or if you've got your kids in the car, you're going to want to protect your kids. And so you are going to respond in that aggressive manner back to them because that's what we as creatures inherently do. That's normal. But in order to be better than that, we should not respond that way. Now, are we going to do that 100% of the time? Absolutely not. And hopefully the person in the other vehicle isn't one of those 37% or whatever it was that has a firearm.
Yeah.
But that's why we respond that way. And for aggressive drivers, it may have been that they got cut off 2 miles back the road. And so now they're aggressive because someone was aggressive to them. And so now they're just responding to every other person on the road, assuming, and again, there's a lot of math that goes into this on the way that the brain algorithm works, but they now assume every other person on their road is an aggressive person.
Oh, they are.
The last person was.
They are.
And so now they are responding to every potential person as an aggressive driver. Not
Now
necessarily
you're
that-
an aggressive driver is basically it just perpetuates the
Exactly.
problem.
It is perpetuating and continuing that behavior until we put a stop to it. But again, this is all normal behavior. If we're not in a 2-ton death machine, not too big of an issue.
Yeah.
But the issue comes in is because we're in a 2-ton death machine, and we need to recognize that.
I wonder why that's not in a sales slogan.
Buy
Buy your next 2-ton death machine today
Yeah,
at such and such car lot.
I don't think it's as great a sales pitch as some of the other ones they
It's
throw out
honest. And honesty doesn't sell.
there. An honest car salesman. Do they exist?
That's an
Sorry.
oxymoron.
But yeah, and so that's why it is. And so we've just got to be extra careful when we're in 2-ton death machines that we go above and beyond to not act that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it is normal. Outside of a vehicle, it's normal. This is the way we behave. We are protecting ourselves. We're protecting our family from aggressive behavior. In a vehicle, we need to make sure we have extra coping mechanisms to not do that because we're in a 2-ton death machine. And you're probably not going to hurt the person that's being aggressive to you. You're going to hurt that minivan driver with the 2 kids in the back seat that had nothing to do with what was going on.
You know, I think one of the things that kind of aggravates the situation typically, and it, like I was saying at the beginning, is like it can just take a breeze to make this possible. But any inclement weather, and you know, I looked at some of the stats. It was talking about like 70% of the nation's drivers are in a region where there's snow involved, snow and icy roads, and so you're pretty guaranteed around here to have to maneuver in that. So how come all the California drivers go to those places? Why? What's wrong with them? You can spot them a mile away, and then you're going to catch up to them real quick because they're going to.
Okay.
They're not even going fast enough to get traction on the road.
When I lived in Seattle, Seattle does not ever really get snow. But when I lived up there, I think this was the winter of 2003, 2004. And when I was up there, there was a really massive snowstorm. If our listener is from Seattle and was there in 2003, they know what I'm talking about. But it was a massive snowstorm. Okay. For us, it would be a mild snowstorm. So they maybe had, I think it was maybe about an inch of snow up there. They just don't have the infrastructure for it. And when that happened, the entire world stopped.
Oh, when it dusted in like Georgia, and it like dusted and made the roads a little icy, like it shut down the function of the city. Like everything's like, we quit. I don't even know what to do with myself.
People got out of their cars and left their cars on the roads, and they just walked the rest of the way. I witnessed
Honestly,
this.
that's a good thing.
And that was, I mean, maybe it was 2 inches of snow. I may be exaggerating with only an inch. But it really wasn't a lot of snow. Now, I'm from Southern California, so for me, it was a ton of snow. So I get where they were coming from. But yeah, it's just not something they're used to. And yeah, it is safer. Leave the car and walk because you have no idea what you're doing.
All right. So of the 228 million that you're talking about here. One study found that 18% of licensed American drivers would fail the knowledge test for a learner's permit if they had to retake it. Another study found that nearly 40% would fail it. The passing score for the knowledge test is usually an 80%.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I would agree with probably the 40%, especially when you start getting out on the road and you're like, I come up to a roundabout and I have the yield sign, and the person, I won't name their gender, pulls up and stops to wave me into the roundabout. I'm like, are you kidding me? No, go. You're going to cause an accident.
Yes.
Go. What is wrong with you? It's happened twice in this state.
The problem is courtesy does not have a place on the road. I know everyone wants to be the nice person.
Okay, now wait.
No. Courtesy does not have a place. The rules are there to define when people need to go.
Like an on-ramp. Okay, an on-ramp here in Utah, and I get this elsewhere. I think it's more confident courtesy elsewhere. But here, it is entitlement. It means, you're getting on the freeway, and I'm trying to get on the same, and I'm in that lane. I won't move over. I'm going to speed up so you can't come on the freeway. And that's the zipper merge. They don't even know what that is.
And
they don't even know how to spell it.
And that's the rules of the road. That's not courtesy. That is, the rules are there to you move in. And this is actually...
Turn an indicator on. It does not mean make space behind you. It means make space for that person to come over.
This is on the driver test, is how to properly merge.
You're right. That's why it's 40%.
A rule. The rules of the road, the laws are there to dictate how we drive. Courtesy has no place, because usually when you're trying to be courteous, you're breaking the rules. And that has no place on the road. The rules are there to keep everyone safe, and they're designed to keep everyone safe. If you break those rules to be courteous, you are the most dangerous driver out there.
Yeah. No, I agree. One of the things with these stats and the things that I'm covering, I'm going to add as links in the bottom of our show notes, basically. But just to kind of give you a rundown, ranked. This was actually most recent, so this one's like within the last year was done, and I got it from Lending Tree. Basically, I don't know why Lending Tree did this, but it was cool. Rhode Island had the highest driving incident rate. So if you're ever in Rhode Island, plan for accidents. 2 states had more than 30 accidents per 1,000 drivers. I think that's California and Rhode Island, I believe.
Wow.
California had 3.45 DUIs per 1,000 drivers. Speeding incident rates in Montana were significantly higher.
Oh, yeah, it's Montana. There's no one there. Even I might speed in Montana.
North Dakota, this is your area, ranked first for citations. And the only reason why I put those two together is because you have police force that are probably enforcing a lot stricter road laws, and that's why you have more citation rate.
Well, if you think about it, in those areas, not to interrupt you more, but in those areas, you probably have a lot of cattle on the road. And so if you're speeding, it takes you a lot longer to slow down. And so if you're heading into a herd of cattle, or someone driving their cattle down the side of the road, and you've got an errant sheep or cow that comes across, you're not going to be able to stop in time. So they've got to be really strict about that so that you are not going to potentially... Now, there may be no one driving cattle on the road that day, but it's to make sure that as you're going through there, you don't run the risk.
I love the justification. It's great. It's just fantastic.
Well, I've driven through these small towns. They do...
Save sheep.
They run their sheep along the side of the roads. That's how they get around out there.
I get it. All right, so last little bit of information. I decided I would take a test, and it's a practice test, so it's not the real deal. But I did pass. I got 21 out of 25.
Yeah.
And the ones that I did, I answered like at least two of those. I just didn't read the whole question.
Yeah.
Because it was like one of the option was all of the above, and I didn't. I was like this one. Boom. I was I should have paid attention. That was my reason why I got C's in school. Like. But like the reality is this is, guys, we can all do a little bit better. Honestly, go do a search online on your smartphone and find a device and find a test and take it. See what you don't know. Guess what? If you didn't answer the question correctly, it doesn't say, you're wrong, do it again. It says, well, that was a wrong answer, and here's the correct answer, and here's why this is the correct answer. And you can learn something about whether you read the whole question or whether you actually didn't know the answer to that one. There was a couple that I was like, I didn't think that,
The more you know, the safer you will be.
Yeah. I might even go the speed limit permanently. Like,
hey, that would be nice. I remember an old comic, The Born Loser, I think was the name of the comic strip. And the 3 panels, it was a Sunday comic. The 3 panels showed him yelling at another car that was going slow, and then shows him sitting there in the next panel. It says he shouldn't be driving the speed limit anyway. So he's yelling at someone driving the speed limit. So yeah, I think about that every time I'm talking about this stuff.
So as we learn how to drive and also operate, a lot of it, we talked about distracted driving and things like that. One of the things that we're headed in the direction of is, and this is like back in the olden days sort of thing. The last time that a keyboard was ever redesigned or reimagined was 1994. So that was 30 years ago that we had any sort of addition, other than like I would say like Apple like added theirs, but that was the last time that they had the Windows button added to the Microsoft keyboards. And since then, Microsoft has really pushed, especially over the last year, really pushed AI tech. Their AI tech has been, and it's not actually the last few years or the last year. It's been years and years. I mean, they had Cortana. I remember when I got my laptop and I opened that thing up, and it's like this thing started talking to me. I was like, "Shut up! Ew, no! What are you? Ew! I'm a Google." I
hate all of those things.
But you can, while you're driving down the road, if you have an Apple, you can ask Siri to send a text message or make a phone call.
Yeah, because that's
hands-free.
effective.
Yeah, I know. When you're like, call 911. You're like, no, stop. But, or, like you could ask Google to send a text message, and you're like,
yeah, you don't want to read that text message.
It's worse than predictive texts, like, or autofill, whatever it is. It's terrible.
Our AI overlords are no good at sending text messages. That's where we're safe.
Yes.
So when our AI overlords take over the world and we run our rebellion, text messages are the way that we're going to be able to send secret messages that they will never be able to figure out.
So where this button is going to be placed is somewhere around the arrow buttons, all 4 arrows.
No.
Next to kind of where the other side control button is right there, because nobody ever uses that control button.
I hate that.
But
I use that control button.
I don't know if they're going to get rid of it or if they're just going to place another button there. Like on my other side, I have quite a few buttons. I don't know why I have some buttons, but I do. And then so I'm like, I had to get used to that, because the commands that you would normally do on my PC don't work because I pushed the wrong button. And I was like, it's the one next to it. Yeah, okay. So for me, I'm like, well, just adding another one. It's just, I won't think about it. I'll think about it for like a minute, and then I'll remember. And then from then on, what this button is basically, it is the activation of something called Microsoft Copilot. It is an AI intuitive program that they have incorporated into everything. Similar to Cortana, except that, it doesn't talk. thank God. But but at the same time, like if you're wanting it to do something alongside your function or your operation, what you're doing there, it's just that button, and they don't even have a design idea for it yet. This is just within the next year will be initiated and expected on all of their devices. So if you're in the market for a new PC and it carries Microsoft, which everything on earth carries Microsoft at this point. So you're going to see this Copilot button show up, and it is their form of forcing you to like Microsoft AI, which isn't, all the AI options out there, and honestly isn't the best AI options out there. But they've always pushed this. This has been their mission since they started incorporating something like this way back when. And so now they're like, finally, we should just probably, create a button for it so that you can cue it instead of talk to it. And that way, it's easier. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But it's here. It's here to stay. Microsoft, it will make it a mission for you to be familiar with it, love it, like it, and accept it when it takes over.
Yeah, no.
All right, guys, we have reached the end of our show, and I want to just add the normal flair, but also the other part of this is life's too short. Slow down. Be safe. Don't get mad at other drivers. They're idiots, but so are you. So am I. So is Joe.
Yep.
Keep laughing and keep learning. And remember, idiots have way more fun.
Check your shoes.